you let go of my wheel? Hey, come on! Hey, watch it!
As if our own society couldn't get even more controversial or ridiculous. Here comes Todd Phillips to remind us all just how insanity is always doomed to repeat itself. At this point, making a video on this feels like beating up on low-hanging fruit. I'm sure you've already heard the general consensus for this one.
It should have been made. It destroys the concept of the Jonkler. Well, it's a cinematic disaster on all levels. Todd Phillips spat in the face of the Jonkler fans and deserves to be
burning in the depths of hell.
Oh my god, this video just started. I need to calm down. I'm here to play the middleman. I'm going to approach this movie as both an enjoyer of the Jonkler character, but also attempt to at the very least understand where the production for this movie was coming from. I may have some hot takes, some cold takes. Either way, I don't give a shit what everyone else is saying on how others should feel about this movie. These are my honest to God thoughts on this piece. First things first, I think in order to understand where everyone is coming from when it comes to this installment in the Jonkler universe, I think it's important to go back and remind ourselves what it was about that first one that left such an impact on society, for better or for worse. It feels like just yesterday when all the hype was there for it. How this was campaigned to be the very first superhero studio genre movie to even be considered for an Academy Award. How Joaquin Phoenix swept everyone's expectations by winning Best Actor for his portrayal of the Jonkler. How publicists and media outlets were out there warning everyone to not go see this because it would mark the downfall of humanity, as it would encourage anarchy and chaos. Which ironically ended up being like the best marketing a movie like this could have asked for. I mean, hey, I wasn't on the hype. And at the time, it seemed like a fresh, original idea to do a psychological character study on, without a doubt, the most infamous comic book villain in the world. Once it came out, the general consensus from one side was that it revolutionized psychological thriller storytelling and gave direct shots at all the social injustices occurring in this nation. While on the other side, it ripped off all the story beats from different Martin Scorsese movies, particularly Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy. Now, I've only seen one of those movies, so to make that comparison, I think it's pretty valid. Seeing unresolved mental health and social isolation completely deteriorate someone on the inside to the point of committing violent crimes is a touchy subject, especially nowadays with mental health on the decline. Score? And I would be lying if I said that stories that are focused on not the rise of our protagonist, but rather the decline of them isn't right up my alley. After 5 years with all the hype dying down, I think now is a better time to get a more analytical look on what this movie succeeded in and what has aged rather poorly. Now, does it really romanticize mental illness in the name of grand spectacle?
All I have are negative thoughts.
Well, yeah. I think it does, kinda. Even the biggest edgelords on the planet wouldn't be able to deny that it goes really far in certain scenes. Maybe to the point of it feeling like it's just playing for shock factor, or it's just looking to weird out all the plebs out there. Yeah, I get it, this isn't the typical character you want to root for. It just feels more like a massive pity party where we're just constantly seeing the entire world just beating down on this character to where he reaches his breaking point. I hope that's the only aspect that most people can relate to. I mean, don't we all have a breaking point? Sometimes we go through a rut in life where we feel like nothing is going right, everything's just going wrong. And eventually it just requires one bad day to just completely crash out on everyone around you, even loved ones. Now, is that ever an excuse to murder bullies and work ops? I wouldn't say so, but I still do see where he is coming from. You don't have to agree with what a villain does in order to understand where they are coming from. Now, I do think Joaquin Phoenix's performance does hold up, and I do think he did deserve that Oscar win for Best Male Actor. Now, here's a take though that I don't hear many people talk about, or at all even, and that is I personally do not see this iteration of the Jonkler as the same version that most people know. You know, the version that fights Batman, the one that becomes the crime prince of Gotham. Well, especially after this second movie, but we'll get to that later. But let me explain what I mean. Even back when this movie first came out, I didn't feel like we were watching the rise of the Jonkler. It felt like we were watching the downfall of Arthur Fleck. The reasons I don't dislike the changes made for this character, it's because we've had so many versions of the Jonkler. It's the same argument I had when the Batman first came out. I'm open-minded to see a different version. Show us a different take on the character. Jonkler from 2019 felt like it was first and foremost a character study piece before being a standard comic book villain origin story that Trojan horse a bunch of other themes in there. Even Todd Phillips back then revealed that the first initial draft for that movie wasn't even about the Jonkler. Themes on tragic upbringings, mental health, yourself, meeting your heroes, isolation, with a dash of elitism thrown in there because this character is most associated with crime and anarchy. Depending on what side of the fence you sit in, I don't think you could deny that this movie definitely hits the nail on the head when it comes to the current climate and politics nowadays. Now, I don't think it's just Arthur that drives all these themes home, but especially the supporting characters. Arthur's asshole co-workers, his lying delusional mother, his idol Murray Franklin, and his supposed long-lost father Thomas Wayne. All those imaginative relationships he built in his head are tarnished as the movie goes on. It just gets more and more tragic to see his already pathetic life get more destroyed. All of it is definitely intentional, and I think it still holds up fairly well as a standalone story. Now throw in Michael Scher's sharp cinematography and Hildur Guðnadóttir's haunting score, and you got a formula that you can see how it became the very first R-rated movie to surpass $1 billion at the box office. I think it was well deserved. Alright, enough glazing. Now to talk about the stuff that has not aged well. Honestly, it's not a whole lot I dislike about it. It's really the stuff involving Zazie Beetz' character. Arthur stalking her around the city is actually like the one thing where I think crosses the line and makes him just way too far unhinged in my opinion. All the outbursts and killing, no problem. But all this stalking to a mother and her child, that is where I cross the line. Upon every rewatch, it basically makes every single one of their scenes just feel like a waste of time. And really the twist was only effective on the first watch. It really loses its value the more you rewatch the movie. Does it make sense for his character? Sure. Does it feel like it goes on for too long? Sure. And of course the connection between Arthur and this version of Thomas Wayne. Again, let's just take a moment and pretend like the sequel movie doesn't exist and answers the question of, wait, wouldn't Joaquin Phoenix's Joker be way too old to be fighting Batman by the time Bruce Wayne grows up in this movie? It feels like Todd wrote everything involving the Wayne family as an afterthought or by obligation because DC probably forced him to, so casual audiences will be able to make that connection. Years later, it still feels unnecessary and it's always felt forced. But overall, I still really enjoy the movie. So there you have it. Yeah, that is my Jonkler 2019 movie review. A satisfying ending for a story that doesn't feel like it needed expanding upon and serves as a perfect standalone story that proves studios do not always need to franchise every single one of their properties in order to be a commercial and cultural success. The end. Good thing they never decided to make a sequel because this one made so much money.
It's not about the money. It's about sending a message.
Good on Warner Brothers and DC Studios for prioritizing integrity in art over making a paycheck. Wait, why is there still more runtime in this video? Joker, Folie, adieu. Oh wow, okay, so this actually happened, huh? Struggling with his dual identity, failed comedian Arthur Fleck meets the love of his life, Harley Quinn, while incarcerated at Arkham State Hospital. The first thing I remember reading was that Joaquin Phoenix said soon after the first Jonkler movie that he wouldn't come back for a sequel unless it was a script that was truly something special, and if it was from Todd Phillips. Soon enough, it was announced Lady Gaga was cast to play the iconic Harley Quinn character, and that the movie was going to be a musical. These elements were certainly met with controversy, to say the least. As time went on, we eventually got behind the scenes photos of Joaquin and Gaga in makeup and costume, and it started to buzz up some interest. Soon enough, the initial trailer dropped and was met with mostly praise.
We're back, baby. We're fucking back. We're back. Classic. We are back.
Then the next trailer dropped, and that's when the skeptics and early screenings began to ruffle some feathers, shake up the circus, if I were to say myself. It would appear that not a lot of things in the marketing material were not quite honest about what contents this sequel would contain. Now that the dust has settled after the humongous backlash and epic bombing at the box office, did it end up warranting its existence, or is all the criticism warranted? Let's get nose deep into some clown pussy and come out laughing on the other side from pure madness. Okay, let's get this out of the way first. Is this movie as terrible as everyone is saying it is? I don't think so. Now, do I think it's necessarily good and just misunderstood? I wouldn't say that either. Let's just say I could see both sides of the spectrum here. I understand people who deem it to be a subversive piece that questions the themes of the first movie and challenges its audience, while I also completely get the people who deem it to be a crime against humanity that just spits on the face of the people who enjoyed the first movie and completely misses the point of the Jonkler. So expect me to be going back and forth with this one. I'm gonna be pointing out the stuff I genuinely did enjoy in this movie and also point out the stuff that does warrant the backlash. Now, do I think this movie should exist? If I had the power to decide, I would rather this movie not exist. I'm sure most would agree, not just for this movie, but just for a lot of unnecessary sequels out there. In a just world where studios actually listen to the consensus of their audience,
Why don't they like it? We spent $250 million on this.
yeah, I don't think this movie would exist, but it does. And I'm well past the phase of being bitter about it. This is what we got, and this is what we have to live with. Once you get past it, the next question you'd ask yourself is, okay, well, this is the movie that does exist. Fine. What's the best case scenario for it to be considered at the very least a competent sequel or one that warrants its existence? Let's go over the aspects I did enjoy about this movie, because it's going to be quicker to go over. From a purely visual standpoint, this movie is spectacular at times. The lighting and coloring really does stand out. There are some genuinely creative shots here. Shots that'll make you go, wow, this really does look like a non-comic book movie. It looks like a movie. The return of Michael Scher as cinematographer and Hildur Guðnadóttir as a composer makes for a vibe that is reminiscent of the first movie. Starting off with an animated sequence in old-style Warner Brothers cartoon fashion to give a recap on the events from the ending of the first movie, I think it was a neat way to foreshadow, pun intended, what this movie would tackle. Both the questions on who the Jonkler truly is, also being a musical number? Kind of out of place considering the tone for the first movie. Thankfully, it's only here and nowhere else in the movie. Nothing to worry about. Okay, back to the themes this opening asks. It's all in the title of this segment, Me and My Shadow. Are there really two personalities to Arthur? Is the Jonkler persona really the culprit to the heinous acts he committed? Or is it simply just the mind of one man that just snapped? A big portion of this movie aims to solve this question. The psychoanalysis approach to getting into Arthur's mind with his abusive upbringing to find a logical reason for the acts he committed. I think it's actually a decent enough story to be a follow-up to the first movie. It's reminiscent of the psychological thriller aspects. It's just now getting a lot more nitty-gritty into this character and figuring out why he is the way he is. Between his therapy sessions, his attorney, to his press interviews, to the testimonies of his court trial, to even all the interactions he has with Harley. It just builds the case of whether he is fully aware of the actions he does, or if he really does have multiple personalities within him. Now on to the actual decent parts with Harley. The concept of a psycho relationship enabling the worst behavior in each other, I feel like is a pretty relatable topic for a lot of people nowadays. It's when they were just talking and learning about each other's lives, did the relationship bloom in very effective but twisted ways. You can see just how awful she is for Arthur. Her desire to only see the Jonkler side of him makes him commit to that persona. And it's those moments where I could see the vision of where the story could have gone. Arthur likes the attention from both her and his fanatic fan base, finally getting the love and attention he never received before. It's what he thinks he wants. It just makes you pity him even further and just re-emphasizes just how tragic of a character he is. There's also a few moments where we get to see how the actions he committed in the first movie emotionally affected the victims that bear witness to it all. I was genuinely enjoying myself when this movie would lock down and take itself seriously, rather than spend screen time on other stuff. Alright, so those are the things I like about this movie, okay? Now to go over the things that bog it down big time. Now, speaking of that other stuff I just mentioned, yeah, the musical segments I was not a fan of. It still perplexes me as to why, of all movie sequels, they had to pick this one to be a musical. What's funny is that the songs themselves aren't bad per se, nor do they even sound bad. It's just that they exist in a story about the conviction of a disturbed killer who comes to terms with his psychological issues. Like, who asked for something like this?
What the fuck were they thinking?
The tonal whiplash just takes so much away from the genuine good moments. The movie attempts to cover up why they made the decision to be a musical by stating how music helps mend together the broken pieces humans have to make them feel whole again.
Okay.
Sure, any form of art can do that, but it doesn't help this movie's case when there are more than 10 musical numbers, taking up at least half this movie's runtime. Now, do I think the concept of music helping the mentally disturbed could have been a decent idea? Maybe. There are a few instances where the recognizable tracks from the first movie are played for scene transitions. Even covers that Joaquin and Gaga are singing during scene transitions work just nice. But nah, bruh, I counted. There are 13 musical numbers in this movie. And the more the movie progressed, the more rampant they became, and it only got more and more frustrating. It's like the movie just constantly teases you. It's like when a serious scene is happening and you're starting to get engaged in the story again, boom, musical number. Now, I'll be honest and state I'm not really a musical fan. There have been a few musicals that I've seen and I can get behind them, but I just cannot get over how, with the way the first movie told its story, the last thing I would think is that any of these characters would literally say what they are feeling, which I would say is my main issue with musicals in the first place. By the end, it seriously feels parody. Even Arthur straight up tells Harley to please stop singing at the end. Literally what the audience is thinking. Okay, fine. Let's just say in an alternate universe where the Jonkler was a big theater icon and was always a musical. Even the musical numbers felt cheap and kind of half-assed. Like, you look at other musicals and the talent on screen goes so hard with the choreography because when it comes to singing and dancing, usually the actors playing the pivotal roles specialize in those things. Joaquin has the voice of a chronic smoker, so to ask him to hit some of these notes is pretty demanding. And of course, he's no professional dancer, so don't expect him to be hitting the Gene Kelly Dark Souls boss move. Now, Lady Gaga is where this whole musical approach is in a very gray area. Like, yeah, she is a good singer and she can hit crazy high notes when the movie asks her to, but that's about it. Her stage presence is not all that impactful by the end. The choreography just doesn't really ask much from these two. It just felt like she was casted to simply promote her music career rather than what was best for the plot of Harley Quinn corrupting Jonkler. It feels like it was all just some paid compromise, especially since most of her other movie roles does also involve her singing. She is a good singer, we already know that, but it hurts even more that she is actually a more than decent actor in the right context with the right script. But no, we're just reminded that we aren't watching Harley Quinn, we're just watching Lady Gaga in Harley Quinn makeup, and it just takes me out of the movie. And you know what's actually like the most unintentionally hilarious thing about this movie? The Jonkler, that we all know, is one of the few existing characters in any fictional media who can literally do anything and it will feel canon for that character to do. That is how much of an unpredictable showman the Jonkler truly is. Once again, this is nowhere near the same version of the Jonkler that we all know, so it doesn't really jive well to see him act like that version that we all know when we have been just seeing him be depressed and existential this past movie. Okay, musical rant over. Now, when it comes to actual story stuff, that doesn't work for me. I think they jumped the shark on a few aspects as well. The breaking point where Arthur finally admits that there is no Jonkler. It's only been him the entire time putting on an act. As a story beat, this riled up a lot of people because it made them think that it basically ruins the whole point of this movie and even the last movie. Just a huge waste of time that has the Jonkler revert back to just being Arthur. Now, I'm upset about it for a different reason than most people. I believe that seeing the downfall of a character is still a progressive form of storytelling. Let's say we see the rise of someone overcome their problems, only to see them fall back into those bad habits that they overcame. Is it a form of regression? Yes, it is. I'm not saying it isn't. But regression is still storytelling. It's reflective of real life people and their problems. Then the next defense comes that this isn't real life, this is a movie, and endings in movies should feel satisfying. To that I say, fair. It is fair to want a satisfying, happy in quotes, ending to your stories. But my rebuttal to that is, did you watch the same movies as myself? The story from the very beginning of the first movie was dark, depressing, and the opposite of a standard satisfying story. I'm not surprised it went out of its way to make sure that we all felt uncomfortable about where the story ended up. It kind of feels in its nature. That is the ultimate underlying factor I'm pointing out here. Just because something is intentionally done doesn't automatically make it smart or good. My biggest issue with all of that is that it felt rushed. The flip-flop of him being back to Arthur right after he just embraced the Jonkler persona again really comes out of left field. It makes me think that a bunch of scenes were cut from the theatrical release. Prior to watching this movie, I was shown a somewhat spoiler clip unrelated to the movie, but in retrospect, it does kind of give away a key aspect to why the Jonkler reverts back to Arthur in this movie. It's this one.
I'm gonna shove these fucking games up your ass! Batman Revenge of the Joker! Batman Return of the Joker! Batman Forever! Batman Return of the Joker on Game Boy! And last but not least, Batman on Commodore 64!
Yes, I went into this movie with the question in the back of my mind, wait, is Jonkler gonna get something shoved up his ass in this movie? And to my unpleasant surprise, that indeed was suggested between Jonkler and the guards of the prison. Yes. Jonkler gets in prison. And yes, Jonkler getting in prison is the breaking point for him. Now, the other problem with that is that I had to do multiple rewatches to catch on to that. I didn't really understand or get that the first time I watched the movie, and I'm sure many people didn't get it either. I'm sure they were just probably thinking, oh, this scene is just shown for the sake of making the movie seem dark and edgy. No, I think it's actually an intentional story beat that was just severely overlooked by a lot of people. I don't think it's effective storytelling if your audience leaves confused as to why a character decided to do something, and if they have to go back home and do research as to why they did it. It just makes it feel rushed and sloppy. If more definitive hints and clues were left for the audience to piece together, oh, that's why the Jonkler broke and returned back to Arthur, then I feel the reception wouldn't feel so polarizing. Now, the final aspect that kind of puts the nail in the coffin as to why I think this movie shouldn't exist, one of the prison inmates shanks Arthur, and the movie suggests, yes, this indeed is going to be the Joker. Not the Jonkler, the Joker, the one that this universe's Bruce Wayne is going to grow up to fight. It's kind of funny because the way this character was, it kind of represents how the hardcore Jonkler fans feel to Todd Phillips after this movie. How dare he squander the legacy of their incel king. Now, is Arthur dying all pathetic and alone out of the blue? I don't think so. I honestly do feel like the death in itself is a proper conclusion for this tragic character. It's just the fact that it alludes for more to come from this universe that just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Even though Todd Phillips said that he was always going to be done with DC even after this movie, I mean, especially now after how it performed, I just think it reeks of franchise fatigue and studio executives not knowing when to give franchises their own proper endings. Now, with James Gunn being CEO of the new DC universe, only time will tell if anything more comes out of this universe. I hope not. You know it's a mishandling when you find out that this was actually the initial plan for the ending of the first Jonkler movie, but Christopher Nolan, who was an executive producer back then for the DCEU, advised them not to do that ending. Well, Nolan's now gone doing bigger and better things on his own, and it seems Todd didn't bother to keep following his advice. Great. By the end of the day, Jonkler 2 feels like one of the most frustrating types of sequels to exist. It's one that should have not existed in the first place, but since it does, it decided to crap the bed by injecting so much tonal shift from the first movie that it really makes it feel like a completely different entity. The genuinely few compelling moments give false hope that it actually had decent ideas to tell if they went all the way with them, rather than inject lazy musical numbers. With an ending that just feels like it's telling its audience, you are a terrible piece of shit for liking the Jonkler movie. I'm no savvy business movie executive, but usually antagonizing your audience never really goes well. Even for how crazed and toxic the DC fan base is, I don't think anyone deserves to be talked down upon when all they want to do is enjoy a movie featuring their favorite character. I usually do appreciate filmmakers that take risks when making movies, but I think Todd and his crew may have flew too close to the sun with this one. I guess you can say this movie got what it
Fucking deserve!
4 out of 10, most frustrating type of sequel that shouldn't exist with severe tonal whiplash.
Why so serious?